So in the last video, I showed you a little bit about Dreamweaver and showed you how to save a root folder. Now in this video, I'm going to show you how to save and then start to build our HTML web page. So first, I want to go ahead and save my page. Go ahead, File, Save As, and right now it's titled untitled-1.html. I'm going to go ahead and change that to index. For this website and for most of the static websites that you make, we're going to be calling our home page, our first page, index.html. What that does is tell the server that that's the first page of the website, so if I type in mywebsite.com, it'll go ahead and bring this web page up first. So I've changed it. Remember, no capitals, no spaces, and go ahead and hit save. Alright, so I can see if I click over to my files area right here, I can still see my root folder, and I have my index file in there right now. I'm going to go ahead and insert my divs to start to structure my page. One thing to note is that there's a few different ways we can add divs and typically add a lot of the content we can add with Dreamweaver. One way is to go to the insert area and select div, and the other way is to go insert div right here at the top. I'm going to use div right here just because it's a little bit quicker to go to. I wouldn't say that one's right or wrong, but just know there's a lot of different ways that you can do most things with Dreamweaver. Before I actually add this div, I just want to show you a little bit about the insert area. You can see there's a drop down right here, common, structure, media, with all options of different things we can add. Primarily for this video, we're going to be in the common structure area, but the one reason I want to mention it right now is that if you can't find what you're looking for right here and you know that it should be right here, go ahead and click the drop down, just make sure you're in the correct area. So I'm going to go ahead and click right here to add div. A div is a block level HTML element. That means that there's a space between that other elements on the page as opposed to things like inline elements, which we will talk about in a later video. So I want to go ahead and name this, and this will be the kind of name that's associated, and we can add CSS styles too. I'm going to go ahead and call this container. And it gives us some options here of where we want to add this div, and add insertion point's fine. My cursor's right up here in the top left. And after I name it container in the ID area, I'm going to go ahead and click New CSS Rule. You can see there's a few different options here. I've already set as an ID, so that's selected. And to show this an ID in CSS, there's a pound or a hash sign right before the word container. If I go to the drop down, it gives us a couple of options. And just so you have a better idea what these are, where it says this document only, that means I'd only be adding the styles to this page, my index.html page. That can be useful for certain sites, maybe small websites you're working on, but primarily what you're going to use is right here where it says new style sheet. What that does is it allows us to create another file, a .css file, to contain all our styles. That speeds up the design process and the updating process, because since all the styles are contained in one file, if we make one change to one of the styles, it'll change on every page that that's linked up to. For a site like this, we'll link all 4 of our pages up to the style sheet, and by keeping everything in the same place, it's a lot more efficient. It's a lot easier to kind of work with different styles and elements of our page. So I'm going to click New Style Sheet File and hit OK. Since I don't have a style sheet, at this point, it's going to prompt me to save the file. So I'm going to call it styles.css because that's what's keeping all my styles. No spaces, make sure to keep it lowercase. And go ahead and hit save, and make sure you save in your root folder. Always double check right here to make sure your root folder is selected. Go ahead and hit save, and now it'll allow us to define the CSS rule, essentially just add different styles to it. And there's a lot of different things we can add. For this container, there's just 2 small things I'm going to add. So I want to go down here to the category and select box. Here, I don't necessarily want to set the height, but I do want to set the width. And I know I've decided before I started that I would like to make it 1,000 pixels wide. And since this is the container of all my elements on my page, I want to go ahead and set the margin to auto. And I want it to be auto on each side. And since I have this check mark right here, it'll set auto on each side. The reason I want to set my container to auto margin is because it'll keep it centered in the web page. So if I move the browser around, make it smaller or larger, my content will still be centered, and it'll help our website look a little bit better. So I'm all set here. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK again, and it went ahead and put the div in for me. They have some holder filler text right here that I'm just going to go ahead and delete. I'll click right here, that's gone. And next I want to add in my head, or my header. So I'll click right here and select, go to structure and add header. Insert at insertion point is fine. For the ID, I'm just going to go ahead and call this header again. I'm going to click new CSS rule. Everything's the same up here, but one thing you'll see is different is that I'm actually able to select my styles.css file. And this is very important because that'll make sure we keep all the styles within that same document. So we always want to make sure we select that when adding a new style. I'll go ahead and hit OK. And there's just a couple things I want to add to this one. So I know I want to add the width again, so 1,000 pixels wide. And there's a few other things we want to do. I'm sure if you remember from the website initially, it had that teal header with bold text. We'll go ahead and add that later. So go ahead and hit OK, and hit OK again. And you can see I have my header right there. The next thing we want to do is add if you remember, that big area for a photo. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and add another div. And the difference with this one is we want to add this in after the tag, because we want to make sure we keep it within the container, but we also want to be below the header. So after the tag, header ID equals header, and ID, I'm going to call it, we don't want to have any spaces, but I can add in a dash. I'm going to say main image. And I can set new CSS rule, make sure that my styles.css file is still selected, hit OK. And I want to go ahead and set width one more time here to 1,000. Hit OK, OK. That's the main image area. The next thing I want to go ahead and do is add in a navigation bar, and I'm just going to leave this text right here as a holder text for right now. So it'll be easier for me to add it, know where it's at, so I can add in my image and other content later. So over here on the right, I'm going to select navigation, and instead of insertion point, I want to drop this right below the main image area. So I'm going to say after tag and select main image, and I'm just going to call this nav. So I'll say ID nav, new CSS rule. Once again, check for everything, all good. Hit OK. And box, I want to go ahead and set width one more time to 1,000. And hit OK. And then now we only have two more things we want to add. I would like to add a article area, which is going to hold our text and main content, and then a footer. So right over here we have an option for article. Go ahead and select that. And we don't want to wrap around selection, but we want to drop it in after the tag. We want to drop it in after that navigation tag. And I'm going to go ahead and call this content. So that's where the content of my page is going to be. Set new CSS rule. Styles.css is selected. One thing I do want to do here, because I would like to have a little bit of spacing on each side of this, just to kind of get started. I'm going to go ahead and where it says box, instead of saying 1,000, I'm going to go ahead and just say 950. And margin, I'm going to go ahead and set to auto, so it'll still be centered within the other content area. Go ahead and hit OK. Hit OK again, and I'm just going to go ahead and drop in my footer now. This actually does not need a name, but I'm going to name it anyway. Go ahead where it says insert after tag, and I want to insert it after that content tag. I'm going to call it footer. Select new CSS rule, OK. And where it says box, I'm going to go ahead and set width to 1,000. OK, OK. Now it doesn't look like much, but this is essentially the structure of my HTML document. In the next video, I'm going to show you how to begin to style this a little bit more and also add in our text and images. So our site will look a little bit more like the example we looked at earlier.